the sheep scatter.
A shepherd is who they need.
That'll teach you to mess with my sheep!
Are you going to sing or what?
Follow the light.
Get out!
The king's love of the crown has consumed him. David, are you ready to be the next king?
What? No.
No?
Don't mess this up for me, David. I get to be a princess.
I'm just a shepherd. We already have a king.
We will crush your kingdom!
Those are fighting words! Bring out Goliath!
I've always followed when I'm looking for the way.
He's huge.
Searching for the answer in the moments I'm afraid.
Yep, we're dead.
If you want the secret of freedom and feeling alive.
I told you.
He's brave. He is true. No.
He's so humble, too.
Come on and follow the light.
David! You have stolen the hearts of my people!
I have never wanted the throne.
Lies!
What happens now? You stolen, David. Fight to the death.
I never asked for this.
The true battle is not against flesh and blood, but in our hearts.
I'm a shepherd. What can I do but look after my sheep?
Come on and follow the light.
A big welcome to Chris Botha, Technical Supervisor of the animated feature film David. Thank you so much for being here today. David was created by an incredible team here at Sunrise Animation Studios, right here in the Mother City. And it's already reached around $80 million in its first few weeks. There's so much to love about the film, but we'd like to understand a little bit more about the technical side of the process. So let's get into it. Chris, I'd love to understand and hear a little bit about what sparked the initial idea for the film and how the creative vision influenced technical decisions.
So Phil Cunningham, the owner of our company, came up with this idea about 30 years ago. He was kayaking down the Zambezi River in Zimbabwe while he was reading Psalms and fell in love with the story of David and the story of adventure and overcoming difficulty. And that is effectively why Sunrise exists today, is because of that story there. So we did the first script of David in 2014. We did the first research trip to Israel. And then since 2014, this has been in production in some sort of fashion since then. In 2019, we led into our primary art and scripting phase, which is all of the artwork you see behind me was produced during that time. And then towards the end of 2022, we started actual 3D production in various stages. When it comes to how that vision led into the technical aspects of the movie, this was the definition of a passion project, which is every artist's favorite thing, but also worst fear. It comes with extreme dedication from the directors and from the art directors, and also a lot of very stringent requirements that come from them because of the love of the story. So the biggest challenge was just actually being able to represent this idea that Phil has had for the past 30 years. That is effectively why Sunrise exists today. All of our projects up until this point were milestones to reach here, continuously developing our technical skills and our artistry to get here. And scaling up from a small indie studio spread across a couple of business parks to becoming a multinational, multi-100 person studio at any one point in time. It was extremely driven by Phil Cunningham and Linton Levengood, our production designer. They spent an enormous amount of time in micro detail and getting everything historically right. There were 3 or 4 research trips to Israel. They went to archaeological digs, and they really went to the extent of knowing exactly how the stitches and weaves used to look, how the pottery used to look, We have designs from everything. So it was an extreme technical challenge to take that artistic vision and turning it into an actual 3D model that Phil and Linton loved.
I used to watch Jungle Beat on DVD when I was younger, and I can imagine that working on this film was very different to working on something like that. But how did it specifically differ from working on something like the Young David series to even something like Jungle Beat?
So it is a very different show to make. Something like Jungle Beat is set in a world. So when it comes to your set design, oftentimes you're building this world and then you're putting your cameras and your characters within it. When it comes to a feature film where you are distributing across various cities and landscapes, you have to be a lot more strategic about how you design the space that you're shooting in, and oftentimes design to the camera instead of just designing and then putting the camera in it. And that is purely just based on the fact that you can't build the whole of a country within a 3D set. So it was a very, very different. And then when it comes to the actual characters, Young David was the first time we did human characters. It was the first time we did hair, it was the first time we did sophisticated cloth simulations. And that brings a lot of challenges and new departments that we went and hired some very senior, very good people from overseas and kind of brought that knowledge in.
You mentioned obviously the cloth. Was that one of the more complex or demanding like sequences technically, or what else was there that was very challenging?
The entire movie was very challenging. One of our biggest things was the amount of unique assets. So if you have seen the movie, you'll notice that every environment they are in looks different. Every character looks different. Every set of characters look different. So when it comes to all of the cloth and things like that, is extreme detail. So we spent a lot of time with CFX, specifically multi-layered cloth. Like if you see this man behind you, he's actually wearing multiple layers of cloth, and getting those simulations to interact nicely with each other was an extreme challenge. And it is honestly something most studios avoid doing, but we did not know, so we just went and did it.
What were the first major technical considerations when you came on as technical supervisor?
The biggest thing for us was RAM usage. So when you have so many unique assets, you can, in CG, use a lot of smart optimization tools such as instancing and various other things to bring your RAM usage down. But that doesn't eliminate the amount of unique assets you have in a scene. So something that was extremely challenging is giving the artists and globally the actual just hardware resources to be able to work on these big scenes with all of these complex characters. And we had an enormous amount of characters in camera for most of the movie. There were actually very few shots where it's isolated to single or dual characters. And that makes it hard to animate, deal with your CFX and your VFX within those scenes.
Were there any discoveries in previs that significantly changed the pipeline or production plan?
Very much so. So we finished our script quite late. The story wasn't any different to what it was a couple of years ago. How the screenplay played out was quite significantly different. And it's more just to give you the context for certain things. So when it came to previs, a lot of stuff that was storyboarded and planned beforehand, when it actually gets into 3D and gets into camera, it didn't play the way we wanted it to play.
Okay.
So when you have those changes, you now have to switch out a production order of sequences. Your asset departments have to adjust how they are working, have to adjust what they are working on to change the set of assets they're working on to get the new sequence out that has moved up in the order while the story team fixes and figures out the issues.
I mean, there must have been a huge team obviously working on it. How was that team structured, and how did you use ShotGrid, or rather Autodesk Flow, to keep the pipeline aligned?
When we started this film in 2019, we were approximately 60 people only in South Africa.
Okay.
By the end of the project, we had just under 500 people through the studio. At one point, we were 260 people in 27 countries on every continent except Antarctica. It was a massive challenge. We had 48 animators on staff at one point, spread across every major country in North America, Europe, and Southern Africa. ShotGrid and Operate, I must take my hat off to our production staff, did an incredible job. When you have that many people on, the sheer volume of work that is being produced at any one point in time is incredibly hard to keep track of. And our pipeline team and our production team really utilize as many tools automating into Flow or previously ShotGrid to try and get as much information, as much useful information into artists' hands and into directors' hands to try and get the turnaround time from producing something to getting feedback and going back into a shot as quickly as possible.
Yeah. How were the tasks distributed across different software, and what kind of dictated those choices?
Yeah, so when you're staffing a movie as big as David, oftentimes you are looking at two things to decide how you're going to do something. The first thing is, what is the best way we can do it, or the most novel way we can do it? And the second thing is, how many artists can we get who know how to do this? So when we look at our distribution of softwares, Autodesk Media is very dominant in the front end of our production pipeline. So our modeling, our rigging, our groom is all done, and our animation, of course, is all done within Autodesk Media. And then as soon as you get into CFX and VFX and a lot more of the simulation heavy things and lighting, that moves into Side Effects Houdini. And then combining all of our rendered frames moves into Nuke. It is honestly the thing of what is the best way to do it and how do we staff all these people? You might be able to find a cool software that does something, but trying to staff 48 animators who are capable of producing the quality of movie that you would like to make in an unknown software isn't practical.
Could you explain sort of how the pipeline supported post-production processes like editing, sound, and grading?
Yeah, so post-production is often a very strong word in animation because it is such a tight-knit production process. So when it comes to how something like sound or edit integrates to the pipeline, it is continuous on a day-to-day basis from before CG starting all the way till well after CG has finished. So for our editing teams, getting information, sequence and shot layouts and all of that stuff into pipelines so that the artist can work in it. And then as soon as we have any completed work, whether it be playbars or renders or anything, getting that back into edit's hands so they can see how this looks in CG, see it in layout, present it to the directors, continuously making improvements and notes. And then the same thing happens on the sound side. For sound, all of the voices need to be done before you start animating because you have to make the mouth shapes. All of the voices get piped into all of our pipelines. So by the time you launch a Maya scene, it already has the audio ingrained with the correct frame lengths and all of that type of stuff. And then they get that information back pretty much as soon as it's approved to start doing all of the Foley, to start doing all of the sound effects and everything around the voices.
Leaning a little bit more into the technical side, what was the primary DCC in the Sunrise pipeline?
It is pretty much a 40-40 split between Autodesk Maya and Side Effects Houdini, and then the last 20% is predominantly in Foundry Nuke. And yeah, again, well, if we take headcounts, Autodesk Maya is probably slightly heavier on headcounts.
And how did you handle the interoperability between the departments?
Our pipeline team was absolutely instrumental in dealing with that. So we had various challenges. Once you go from a single site to multi-site, we had 5 virtual studios across the planet. It starts becoming extremely difficult, just on a pure getting the data to the people, and then your tooling on moving that data between departments, manipulating the data to extract what you want out of it, integrating that into the production softwares. We had millions and millions of lines worth of code from our incredible pipeline team, and I'll take my hat off to Dexter Schenker, head of pipeline, who has been developing this pipeline for the last 12 years, I believe.
Wow.
But yeah, it's a lot of work.
I also know you used Autodesk Arnold as your rendering tool. How did you optimize it for rendering efficiency?
When you are rendering, there are 2 primary things that you are trying to optimize. You are trying to optimize your RAM usage, and that is to simply be able to open the scene on the computers that you are trying to do these computations on. And then the second point is just render time. So our TD teams, along with our lighting teams, spent a lot of time in optimizing the shaders, optimizing how we are instancing things, editing the integrations between OpenUSD and Arnold, doing a whole bunch of very technical things to try and optimize predominantly our RAM usage because of the amount of unique assets we had, and then just being able to render the movie in time. And
Did you rely on GPU rendering?
not on this movie. GPU rendering runs into a very fundamental issue of just having enough VRAM to be able to open it. So this movie was fully rendered in Arnold CPU.
Okay.
We had about 20,000 cores rendering it for approximately 8 months, and it was all done on site within Cape Town. But yeah, it was all CPU rendered, and I think we ended up at approximately 140 million core hours of render time.
Sure. What modeling style or visual language guided the asset creation, and were there any hero characters that required special workflows?
We had a joke internally that every character was a special character. So we ended up with about 196 unique characters spread across predominantly 3 groups of humans within the movie. Linton and Phil had very strict visions of how they wanted these characters to look. And everywhere from the artwork that you see behind me, from the conceptualization of these characters through to the art packs that they handed over to modeling, it was extremely detailed, it was extremely stringent. And one of the challenges is translating a 2D image into a 3D character. Something you draw on the page, every time you draw it is slightly different. It isn't actually a 3D model that you can turn. So trying to get the look of what you wanted in 3D from something that the directors fell in love with in 2D was an extreme challenge, and took a lot of senior modeling artists to be able to achieve that look.
Finally, what were the biggest technical successes in the pipeline? Not sure if there was anything you would redo or what you would maybe change from a pipeline perspective.
Something that I think puts a massive feather in our hat is just the sheer amount of humans and where those humans were that produced this incredible movie. A normal studio would have consolidated a department within a region if they're going to be multi-regional. We allowed anyone to work on anything from anywhere, and that introduces a lot of problems. We synced about 5.8 petabytes of data globally throughout the production process. But just the fact that we had certain leads sitting in Florida or sitting in LA, and their teams being spread over Europe or Southern Africa or sometimes even Asia, and being able to work interactively and being able to open each other's scenes and produce things and pass them along, I think was an extreme challenge, and that we pulled it off, I think puts a massive feather in our hat.
I also know you were supported by Modena Media Entertainment. As your production management reseller, how did they assist you with project planning or licensing?
So the biggest thing being in the technical side of things is giving our artists what they need. Oftentimes, production changes such as sequence rescheduling means staffing changes. We have onboarded as many as 35 people in a single month. And when it comes to being able to get those people up in time, the biggest thing that our resellers and like Modena has helped us with is just quick turnaround times. Like oftentimes you get things on a Wednesday and it has to be up on a Friday. And just being able to quickly phone someone up and be like, hey guys, I need this stuff as soon as possible, and getting those quick responses and quick turnaround times to assist us and getting our artists moving is extremely important, and we are very grateful.
Is there any advice you would give teams who are planning on doing a fully 3D feature film?
The biggest thing I'll say is know exactly what movie you are making before you start making it. Animation and anything in 3D is extremely expensive. There's so many steps and so many man hours that goes into producing a single character or a single shot. And if you're not 100% sure of what you're putting in that shot, you end up turning your wheels on things that fundamentally aren't important and don't make the movie better.
Right.
And if you're wasting your time on that, you don't get to spend it on making things that do make a movie better. So the biggest advice I give is try to know as much as possible before you actually start getting into 3D. Because as soon as you cross that threshold into 3D, your costs go up, everything is harder, and if you change your mind, it is extremely difficult to undo.
And just before we finish off, can you share more about the film's distribution success so far?
Angel Studios in the US is a distributing partner, and I believe they have signed 46 countries globally. So it is a bit of a slow rollout of the film, and I honestly believe that's the best way to distribute this movie. It comes from a smaller studio. A lot of people, if we do day and date, wouldn't even know about it, never mind if it is worth going to go watch. So it's had extreme success in the US, and it is now moving into Latin America and then moving into Europe towards March. And then throughout the year rolls out in more and more territories. And I think it is just going to continue riding on the success of the previous territories and getting people excited and moving forward as we go through the year.
Can we expect to see any other feature films in the future?
There are various feature films in various stages of production, and that is all I can say.
Well, we'll take that. Well, I can't wait to see what will be coming next from Sunrise Animation Studios. Thank you for your time and the insight. And if you haven't watched David yet, be sure to watch it in cinemas.